The ruins of great cities do not tell us everything about the people who built them. In these streets with mud brick walls, there remains a 5,000-year-old mystery. Perhaps the key to the solution lies in the Indus River, a mysterious silver serpent that rises in the Himalayan mountains and moves through vast landscapes. People settled on its banks despite the floods, tamed the rivers, and transformed the desert into gardens. But what do we really know about them? A century of archaeological excavations has yet to solve the mystery. This civilization flourished for 500 years, then disappeared into the folds of history, but it left behind a sacred legacy: water. One day at sunrise, after the morning ablution in the waters of Saraswati, Srila Vyasadeva sat in meditation. The great sage saw some anomalies in the fibers of the millennium. He prophesied that the life of all material things would be cut short due to the absence of virtue. At the end of a hard day in 1920, Professor M.S. Vats took a look at the remains of Harappa, the main site of the Indus civilization. Sunlight fell on the walls, pavements, and columns. At the same time, hundreds of kilometers away, Professor R.D. Banerjee was excavating the ruins of a giant city, Mohenjo-Daro. In Europe, archaeologists reacted with either amazement or disbelief. European scholars had always underestimated the scale of early Asian civilizations. Since then, no fewer than 1,000 sites have been discovered in an area covering 1 million square kilometers. The Indus River, born from the snows of the Himalayas and bordered by Pakistan and India, is 3,000 kilometers long. Its valley was home to a thriving civilization. For a long time, the image of this civilization was obscure. Early archaeologists thought they had discovered cities of children. They excavated toys, dice, whistles, and marbles. The people seemed oblivious to death and war. They appeared to be a happy people, free from worries. The Arcadians of the Indus River. In the 19th century, for example, it was somewhat acceptable that India was the mother of civilizations. But in reality, the only great civilizations were those of the Middle East and Egypt. Mortimer Wheeler, one of the most prominent British archaeologists working in India, described it as the Cinderella of civilizations because it was the last discovered. At some point, we thought it was a pale copy of Mesopotamian civilizations. But we realized later that it was something completely different. When we began excavating, we realized there was no material that reminded us of Mesopotamian civilizations. On the other hand, we quickly realized we were dealing with massive cities. Some sites exceed 200 or 300 hectares in area. Mohenjo-Daro is probably the largest ancient city in terms of area. Mohenjo-Daro is located on the banks of the Indus River in the Sindh province of southern Pakistan. 2,000 years before Christ, this land was settled by newcomers from the border regions of ancient Persia. Today, it has become a desert. Nevertheless, they established in this place the largest city of the Indus civilization, with 40,000 inhabitants and an area of 1 square kilometer. The streets reflect the genius of their builders. The city planning is considered a model of ancient urban planning. The residential blocks feature long, straight arteries that intersect at right angles. The main street is no less than 9 meters wide. It's easy to imagine it filled with colorful crowds. Imagine the surprise of archaeologists when they discovered that the entire city had a complex water management system. It had 80 public toilets. In residential areas, each house had a tiled bathroom and its own well. Sewerage networks were provided for the entire city. In a unique system for a 4,000-year-old center, sewage channels, gutters, and water collectors were dug in the main streets. In dead-end alleys and small streets, sewage was poured into bottomless jars. Some intersections contained brick containers for garbage disposal. The most exciting discovery was at the top of the city, on a massive brick platform. which was the last refuge from the destructive floods of the Indus River. The inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro built a great bath. They would come to this pool for daily ablutions, and around it was a corridor with fountains. Thousands of cities belonging to this civilization were scattered over an area twice the size of France. One of them was on the island of Kadir Bet. Desertification has now made it a narrow strip in a sea of salt. The city was Dhalavira, a crossroads of intersecting trade routes in the marshy Kutch region. The builders of the Indus Valley mostly used brick, unbaked brick for walls, and fire brick for foundations. In Dhalavira, archaeologists also discovered massive stone walls, 15 meters high. The walls testify to the skill and knowledge of the builders, who must have already been familiar with plumbing lines and water levels. The carpenters of Dhalavira used Himalayan cedar wood in columns that fitted perfectly with precisely cut and polished stonework. Here, too, there was a complex water system serving the city. Water was used to clean the streets. It extended to underground channels, carrying it beyond the city walls. Since its discovery in 1989, an entire city has been gradually revealed from sediments reaching more than 8 meters deep. However, Dhalavira was also an endless source of questions. Archaeologists are particularly interested in the city's suburbs. For Professor R.S. Bisht and his team, Dhalavira brought a new perspective on the technological knowledge of the Indus people. Excavations showed that the city's builders dug directly into the bedrock. As archaeologists dug deeper and deeper, they discovered strange structures like deep pits. For a long time, they could not interpret their purpose. Look at this, it goes deeper and deeper. We don't know how deep it is. We've already gone down 8 meters from the surface, and it's still deeper than that. The rock reservoir you saw there, was this structure part of a defensive system? Or perhaps an underground dwelling? How were these walls built? They were built with great care. The stones fit perfectly, and the wall stands on solid rock, which also forms the floor of the pit. I am standing in a long, deep reservoir, cut through limestone rock. In fact, this is the first example of rock architecture, or architecture carved into rock, built by the Harappans. It continues eastward on this side, further west on this side. We have already confirmed the western end of this reservoir, which is 85 meters to the west. Finally, Dhalavira revealed some of its secrets. Professor Bisht believes the city had 16 water reservoirs around it. Thanks to his work, the city's layout can be reconstructed after 5,000 years. Dhalavira was surrounded by 250,000 cubic meters of precious water. The city covered 48 hectares and had 20,000 inhabitants. In its center was a citadel with solid walls. There was another wall separating the upper part of the city from the lower part. The city contained many gardens, warehouses, and stores. Dhalavira's wealth came from trade in wheat and barley, and its people soon turned to the nearby sea. Even after reconstructing the city's general plan, archaeologists took some time to figure out how the reservoirs surrounding it were filled. Drinking water was always scarce in the Kutch marshes. Today the sea has receded, leaving behind a salt desert. The remaining villages have only a few brackish water wells. Yet the Indus people survived in this hostile environment. 5,000 years ago, in a land alternately scorched by the sun and flooded, civilization arose because it knew how to manage water. The great rivers were fundamental to the development of Indus civilization. As in all agricultural civilizations, thanks to them, we had irrigated agriculture that enabled us to feed cities, where our population would increasingly change, no longer being farmers, but workers and craftsmen. In the past, the Indus River flowed over a vast flat plain, and crops could be grown on this flat land, with the risk of the field disappearing every year. Every year, in July, the monsoon season covers the Pakistani countryside in a blanket. of rain. This is when the Indus River, swollen by melting Himalayan snow, bursts its banks. It spreads everywhere, covering the ground with a layer of mud. However, floods are not considered a disaster, but are welcomed and respected by people as a gift from God. Their properties are mostly located beyond the reach of high water. How did the Indus people manage to tame the destructive floods 5,000 years ago? Archaeologists found the answer in the land surrounding Dhalavira, in dry riverbeds that turn into torrents during the monsoon season. They found traces of stone structures. These were remains of dams built to control water flow. This was the answer. The people of Dhalavira diverted rivers to fill giant reservoirs, the largest of which was 79 meters long and more than 7 meters deep. That wasn't all. For water to flow from one reservoir to another, the architects had to use the natural slope of the terrain. The upper city, where water first flowed, is 13 meters higher than the lower side. This is how they kept the water. Water channels carried it to the heart of the city. The stored water also made it possible to irrigate fields throughout most of the year. The entire city plan was designed to collect precious water. Dhalavira, mistress of the river, seemed to float on silver mirrors. The ruins of Dhalavira are now silent. A constant heat cracks the stone. Water no longer flows in the street, yet a strange atmosphere surrounds the visitor, because this city worshipped water more than any other. The citadel, at the top of the city, also had an innovative system for collecting rainwater. Gutters directed rainwater to a large reservoir outside Dhalavira. For several years, archaeologists wondered about the distinction made by Dhalavira's inhabitants between river water and sky water. For the people of Dhalavira, water was the fundamental element of their survival. Its marriage to the earth made crop cultivation possible. Its alliance with humans allowed for the purification of souls. In the heart of the citadel was a sacred place. There, in the middle of a paved courtyard, the people of Dhalavira had placed 2 tanks and a well whose mouths opened toward the sky. But the men who dug these holes were thinking of the depths of the earth. Archaeologists discovered the place of worship. The well was 4 meters in diameter and 20 meters deep. Women came here to fetch water. The well's rim still contains the grooves that women used to pull up water skins with ropes. For the people of Dhalavira, the purest water was that extracted from the depths of the earth. The blessed liquid filled 2 small pools where worshippers performed ablutions. When descending these steps, they faced the power of the earth, the universal mother, and the purifying power of water. Dhalavira is no longer in the path of any river. There is no sound of spray or drops to disturb the silence of the ruins. Another mystery has long haunted this region. Civilization developed along the Indus River. Why are most of the rediscovered cities located in harsh sandy deserts? Why are these inscriptions scattered in desert valleys? To answer these questions, archaeologists point to an Indian folk song. The Ghaggar-Hakra River, a river long thought to be merely a legend, once flowed through the Thar Desert. The river has now disappeared, but not without a trace. The water still remains stagnant. First, there are satellite images. Second, it's clear that the type of soil here is a dry riverbed. Third, traces of water are still there. Otherwise, there would be no point in having water there. It's not a pond. It's part of the riverbed. These are the 3 pieces of evidence. 4,500 years ago, there was a powerful river flowing through this plain. So the Ghaggar-Hakra, which was said to have risen high in the Himalayas, was not a myth at all. While excavating some unusual earthworks, archaeologists discovered dams protecting fields from floods. They found the same stone walls, the same water management system, the same dams. Today, geologists have also been able to find water. 4,000 years ago, a powerful earthquake changed the river's course. It then moved east toward the Ganges Basin, But the underground water artery was still there, just a few meters below the surface. Since 1990, new wells have been dug, and precious water has begun to flow again. After more than 4,000 years of disappearance, the Gagar-Hakra has re-emerged from the depths of the earth. With it, life returned to the entire region. Fields appeared again in the landscape, and abandoned villages were rebuilt. Much time had passed, but the same methods for cultivating the land and making it fertile were rediscovered. Once again, water emerged as the mother of civilization. 2,000 years before Christ, fields of wheat and barley surrounded the cities between the Indus River and the Gagar-Hakra. Traces on pottery indicate that cotton was grown there. Farmers also cultivated peas and sesame seeds. They raised buffalo, cattle, sheep, and goats. This abundant, diversified agriculture fed the cities and maintained their prosperity. Soon after, villages appeared in the more isolated areas of the vast country. Civilization was spreading. In the walled cities, craftsmen were able to perfect their skills. Each city had its own craftsman's quarter. Ideas, techniques, and inventions spread with trade, and in the markets, in jewelry workshops, scales and weights appeared. The streets were filled with industrious inhabitants. Construction. Workers made new tools, such as jasper drills or stone polishers. City dwellers mastered the art of making ornaments from agate. They made weapons, mirrors, and razor blades, and were superior in woodworking. Their ceramic industries reached all parts of the East. They mastered the art of manufacturing copper and bronze. Artists carved ivory and inlaid semi-precious stones in gold to make jewelry. The level of production was such that the civilization seemed on the verge of entering an industrial age. We have a fairly precise idea of the economic system's strength in the major cities on the Indus River, especially Harappa. These cities were extremely powerful, as they produced goods that only this civilization produced, such as semi-industrial ceramics, not to mention everything that has vanished. As for industry, we might be talking about a massive producer of textiles and a massive producer of processed food products using the techniques of that era, and so on. Obviously, we have no trace of them. They have all vanished. But essentially, we can say that in the Indus River region, in addition to some products, in a state we would call industrial today, they were exported throughout the world, from the Gulf to Mesopotamia. On their first trading expeditions, the Indus Valley inhabitants were keen to mark their products with clay stamps or copper plates, but their preferred method was seals made from soapstone, a material that hardens when heated. Merchants wore them around their necks, and they were widely used. The development of long-distance trade pushed Indus Valley traders to form alliances and invent the concept of contracts. To make contracts, they used precisely carved stone cylinders similar to those found in Mesopotamia. More than 1,000 of these seals have been found. They were carved with animal images: zebu, buffalo, and crocodiles, all with more complex and mysterious decorations. Inscriptions accompany the images. Archaeologists have identified more than 400 recurring signs. One of the problems with the Indus Valley was that these people wrote. We know this, and we have thousands and thousands of documents, but they wrote on a medium that was likely to decay. As a result, their actual writings have never been found. What has been found, as is the case here, are street signs, marks on keychains, everything that remains solid, but the perishable material disappeared. So, we don't know. We don't have text. We witnessed the emergence of a writing civilization, but we didn't know. We thought it was just magical writing. In fact, it was a civilization that perhaps had an integrated political and administrative system, like the Egyptians and Mesopotamians. But naturally, until we succeed in deciphering the writing, or in other words, finding a text long enough to apply classical decoding techniques, We don't even know what type of language these people spoke. In 1999, a wave of excitement swept through the Dalavira site. At the bottom of the northern entrance, the archaeological team made a discovery. Their brushes revealed what looked like an inscription. After several minutes of careful work, the symbols finally appeared. All the workers gathered to watch, and everyone held their breath. It could be a historical moment if the text was long. Enough perhaps the Indus script would finally be deciphered. One by one, the symbols were revealed. They were made of inlaid quartz and were more than 30 centimeters high. Originally, they were probably placed on a wooden board, which had long since rotted away. The team was in great anticipation to recover the message composed more than 4,000 years ago. After several hours, archaeologists had to accept the inevitable. Once again, they could only discover a few signs. The Indus manuscript has not yet found its Rosetta Stone. What do these signs mean? What do these writings tell us about the structure of a civilization that was long believed to be ruled by a man, the priest king? I believe this is the oldest signboard in the world, dating back to the Harappan period. During excavation, we found a wooden frame around it entirely. These letters must have been glued or placed on this wooden board. I don't think this is the right place to put this inscription. I think it should have been displayed on the facade of this majestic northern gate. I don't think we should introduce the concept of the priest king. That kind of thing. Nobody knows. However, for the type of situation we see here, we believe that the Harappan Empire was not ruled by one person, that it was an economic empire. It was a cultural empire in which there were several rulers. Some of them were stronger than the rest. Perhaps one of them was the strongest, who knows? There were several kings, or some princes who ruled larger and smaller kingdoms. Will these statues weighing 9 stones keep their secret forever? Did the northern entrance to Dalavira's citadel bear the name of the ruler who governed the region? Some experts believe so. However, others pointed to the wheels in the inscription. I think they represent the first example of a traffic sign placed at the city entrance. Archaeologists can only dream. Perhaps somewhere, a miraculous treasure awaits them. The discovery. That will solve the mystery of the civilization whose thought is used. Did it have poets and writers? What were its myths? What was its concept of the world? Without these texts, we will never understand this civilization, which soon turned its attention to distant lands. 4,000 years ago, the Indus people set out to search for the mineral. Resources they lacked. They needed copper, tin, silver, and lapis lazuli. Their caravans headed west toward present-day Baluchistan and Iran. They established colonies more than 1,500 kilometers from their homeland, on the borders of Afghanistan. Soon, they began looking beyond the Kutch marshes and the Indus Delta. Beyond that were lands that attracted them. Lands where they could establish ports. A strategy of exchange and trade was taking shape. Until then, the Indus Valley inhabitants were merely boats. Their ships roamed the rivers back and forth, carrying passengers and goods for hundreds of kilometers. These small crafts still exist in Pakistan. Flat-bottomed boats suitable for shallow waters still navigate the rivers. Their design has hardly changed in 4,000 years. In summer, we can work for 6 months during the dry season. We are no longer able to work. The water level drops and the ship hulls sink. Carefully, the first navigators followed the shores of the Arabian Sea westward. Sea transport soon proved its value. It was faster than the long, weak land routes, and, above all, boats carried much larger loads. But where were the merchant ships made? Maritime trade in the Indus River region is an issue that has been addressed over the past 20 years or so. We knew that rivers were used for trade between Indus River cities. The question of maritime trade is more sensitive. It is known that materials from the Indus River reached the Arabian * Peninsula, namely the United Arab Emirates, and present-day Sultanate of Oman. *, some are known from Bahrain, and some from Mesopotamia. We even have texts from Mesopotamia, * including a text by Sargon of Akkad, dating to about 23 *, telling us that he reached Mur aboard his capital, ships from Dilmun, which is the region located * between Kuwait and Qatar, of which Bahrain Island was then the center, boats from Magan, which is the Arabian Peninsula, and boats from Maluha, which is the land of the Indus River, and perhaps * it was actually a multi-party trade involving people from all these regions. It seems that the people * who resorted to water were not landlubbers. You have to imagine that this entire * region of the current Indus Delta is an area of vast swamps, an area that is really difficult * to cross, and moreover, the seashore is also difficult to navigate. But after a while, * of course, everyone started sailing. By that time, the mid-3rd millennium BC * was a time of great international trade in which precious things were exchanged, such as * the large agate beads made by the Indus people, who were the only ones who knew how to make them. But also, trade always revolves around textiles, including precious fabrics made * by the Mesopotamian people, the Indus people, and perhaps they traded in them. There are also many * things coming from distant places. Elephant ivory combs and other various things, including * from the Ganges Valley forests. A wonderful journey began. The first navigators sailed toward the unknown and discovered the world, sailing. From Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro or Dalavira, boats reached the Arabian Peninsula. Then through the Strait of Hormuz, * they sailed across the Persian Gulf to distant Mesopotamia. 3,500 kilometers from the Indus Valley, * Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates at the entrance to the Persian Gulf. * today has become a busy commercial port, where fishing boats compete with merchant ships and oil tankers. This was where the traders from the Indus River landed. With their culture and language vastly different, how was the first contact between them? * how did these people communicate when they interacted? We have a Sumerian text dating to the end of the 3rd * millennium in Mesopotamia, talking about an interpreter from Maluha. In other words, someone who * was fluent in both Indus and Sumerian languages. Unfortunately, he didn't leave us a dictionary, by the way. But in reality, you have to imagine that this prehistoric world, where people constantly exchange * ideas, is a multilingual world. It's our world that has now become a world where * people speak one language plus English. It's a world often covered by language by only a few *thousand, while the neighboring group speaks another language. Thus, one by one, all * these people had to understand each other. On our island, its civilization's influence extended widely in the Arabian desert. Its royal tombs tell this story. Archaeologists have discovered red agate decorations and ceramics typical of the Indus Valley. These pits, or these burials, date from between 2300 and 1000 BC. * the materials, especially pottery, are under study, but so far, we have been able to identify at least * 10% of the entire collection that was imported from abroad, especially from the Indus Valley and Baluchistan. * even further, while in the Arabian Gulf, archaeologists are combing Bahrain Island * to prove the cultural marriage between the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia. * it's a massive task. They have been able to identify 1,000 graves scattered over an area of 695 square kilometers. In this funerary complex, Dr. Cindy searches for the grand prize, a text that allows scholars to translate the inscriptions of the Indus civilization. in the world of archaeology. This discovery could have had the same impact as the deciphering of Egyptian hieroglyphics by Jean-Francois Champollion in the 1820s. I hope we will find someday two inscriptions together in one tomb. Indus Valley and Mesopotamian dot. We solve the problem in one tomb and carry it. We hope so. Don't forget that here in Bahrain, we have thousands and thousands of burial mounds. There are two merchants and two cultures, Mesopotamian and Indus Valley, coming and sitting together here for a long time. We believe we will find. Someday. History teaches us that even the greatest civilizations are destined to disappear. The Indus Valley Civilization was no exception. From 1800 BC onwards, it was no longer mentioned in Mesopotamian tablets. Little by little, the streets of its cities became empty of people. The craftsman's place no longer rang with the sound of tools. Buildings and irrigation systems were left to collapse. The great cities were destroyed by time and weather. How can we explain this sudden deterioration? There are many theories. Some experts believe the empire succumbed to invaders from Central Asia. Others point to its destruction by floods or earthquakes. What disaster led to the end of these magnificent cities, and where did their people go? Did they die? Did they flee? Did the disappearance of the Ghaggar-Hakra River lead to irreversible changes in their lifestyle? We have no text to shed light on all this, and we know little about how the Indus administration worked to be able to determine the causes of its decline. Can we talk about decline? What do we know about the world that succeeded the Indus civilization? How did the Indus civilization disappear? The first answer is probably that it did not disappear, at least not in this way. What is certain is that from a date that can be determined by the author, but let's assume we witnessed around 1000 BC, what is known as regionalization, that is, the disappearance of this massive cultural unity in favor of regional entities. That continued for a long time. The great cities were abandoned. This is certain, and this is something that actually happens often. Great cities are abandoned. This is mainly because the way society operates is no longer able to support them economically. But this doesn't mean that people have left. This only means that they started living differently, and that this different lifestyle is less visible to archaeology. This is one of the real problems. Archaeologists cannot see everything. The empire literally collapsed. The fertile lands surrounding Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, or Dolavira formed independent states. New crops appeared, and farmers began raising horses, camels, and donkeys. Gradually, one people adopted a variety of cultures, yet some retained part of this heritage. Adalai, a temple in the heart of India. At the foot of these steps, a large well was carved into the rock in the 16th century. It is a passage between two worlds, between the bowels of the earth and the heavens. Thousands of worshippers still come here to gaze at the smooth surface of these waters. It is believed to be the purest water ever. The elusive civilization of the Indus River was a magnificent chapter in the human story. Today, the banks of the Ganges River vibrate with the sounds of believers' calls, heirs to a long tradition. This is the legacy. It passed to medieval and modern India, reaching us seemingly unchanged. These gestures and chants seem to have crossed the centuries. Watching the rituals of Indian believers who worship a benevolent god in the Ganges River, we see the faces of the Indus people, the people who became masters of the river to build their empire.